I love the ocean, but I'm not really a beach person. Spending days just lying on the sand never really appealed to me. I'm more of a, okay, that was nice, what's next kind of a guy. So when some friends suggested that I might want to join them on a cruise ship, I was a little wary. Yes, I would be on the ocean, but being stuck on a ship sounded to me not too different than being stuck on a beach for 2 weeks, but with this time with no way to escape. Much to my surprise, I loved it. Being at sea really helps me relax. While on the ship, I attended some guest lectures given by various people about some of the locations we would be visiting. Now, I love talking about science, you might have noticed, so the idea of being at sea on a beautiful ship and chatting all day about science sounded great. When my sabbatical came up in 2015, I got the opportunity, travelling as a scientific lecturer around Southeastern Asia. It was a great experience and there was plenty of material to lecture about. Southeastern Asia is like a geological laboratory and is one of the most volcanically and seismically active places on the planet, and one of the most wonderfully biodiverse places on Earth too. I really wanted to present a talk on dinosaurs, but relate it to the locations we would be visiting. The lion's share of the ports of call, though, would be in Indonesia. Indonesia has rocks from the Mesozoic era, the time in which we find dinosaurs, but at 2015, no dinosaur fossils had been found, although ichthyosaurs, a marine reptile, not a dinosaur, from the Middle Triassic period, had been found. The problem is, dinosaur fossils are not really as common as you might expect from all the books, articles and TV shows you might have seen. One does not come to an outcrop, remove a little loose sand and voila, the perfectly preserved head of a T-Rex. There are many factors that have to come together for a living organism to become a fossil. One of the most important, in most but not all cases, is to cover the carcass of the organism with sediment as soon as possible. This effectively gets it out of the way of scavengers and preferably into conditions where oxygen levels may be sufficiently low to help slow decay. This increases the chances that the processes of fossilization may occur and preserve some of the organism. The problem that dinosaurs had, along with many terrestrial vertebrate creatures, is that they tend to live in environments that are net areas of erosion rather than deposition of sediment. Have a look at any landscape. Although you may see lakes and rivers, most of the land is exposed to erosion. Creatures that die on land will most likely be exposed to scavengers, the rest of their remains strewn about and rotting in our oxygen-rich atmosphere. This explains why A, the majority of fossils that are found are from aquatic environments, and B, why the majority of dinosaur fossils are from rocks that were deposited in sediment in or close to rivers and lakes. So for a dinosaur to maximise its chances of becoming a fossil, it really needs to be close to one of these environments when it dies. One notable exception is if dinosaurs get caught in volcanic ash falls or mud flows. These are lahar deposits, similar to what happened to humans in Pompeii and Herculaneum in AD 79. As has been proposed for some spectacular dinosaur and bird fossils lying in the early Cretaceous Liuchuan deposits in northeast China. So, to maximise your chance of finding a dinosaur, you need to satisfy two basic things. One, it is vital to look in sedimentary rocks of the right age. The dinosaurs range is sandwiched between the largest extinction in Earth's history at 251 million years ago and the extinction that wiped them out from the planet, probably due to a massive meteor strike centred on the Yucatan Peninsula at 66 million years ago. Dinosaurs probably evolved around 230 million years ago during the late Triassic, making their time on Earth some 164 million years. For comparison, we Homo sapiens have been around for the last 200,000 years, with our genus Homo perhaps around 2.5 million years old. In terms of longevity, dinosaurs were a very successful group of creatures. Secondly, we also need to find rocks of the right type too. These rocks need to be terrestrial and not marine, and they most likely need to be rocks deposited in or near rivers or lakes, although there are notable exceptions such as the volcanic deposits we mentioned earlier. But getting back to my desire to write a lecture about dinosaurs while in Southeast Asia. As I noted, there have been fossil marine reptiles of the right age found in shallow marine deposits from Indonesia, but what I needed was sedimentary rocks of terrestrial origin. So how could I bring a dinosaur lecture into the schedule? I could, of course, just throw one in, but how much better if I could make it relevant to the areas we would be visiting? There were rocks relatively close in Thailand that fit the bill. Sedimentary rocks belonging to the Korak group are known to be terrestrial in origin. They ranged from about the Middle Triassic to the Cretaceous, that's right for the time of dinosaurs, and were deposited mostly in coastal settings and alluvial, that's river floodplains, so the right type of rocks too. They have a distinctive red colour common to many rocks of this type, caused by the presence of oxidised iron minerals and are often called red beds. In effect, these rocks are rusty. You can see similar but older rocks in this image from the Orkney Islands of Scotland. Fossil plant pollen, when present in the Thailand sections, indicated that the environment was dominated by gymnosperm woodland in a seasonally dry subtropical climate. This group of sediments also contains horizons that have produced dinosaur fossils. A unit called the Sao Kur Formation has produced dinosaurs of early Cretaceous age, including Phuangarasaurus, a dinosaur belonging to a group we call the Titanosaurian sauropods that contained some of the largest animals to have walked the earth, such as Argentinosaurus. Estimates vary, but it may have weighed about 90 tons and been 100 feet, that's 30 meters long. Fragmentary remains of the carnivorous dinosaur Siamotyrannus, the Siamese tyrant, have also been found in Thailand that possibly belong to a broad group called the Carnosaurs. These included various fearsome bipedal dinosaurs from the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods, such as Gigantosaurus. Many of these finds have been fragmentary, but still are significant in providing a broader picture of the global distribution of dinosaurs during the Mesozoic era. But I still had a problem. The cruise I was on would not be visiting any ports in Thailand. Darn. Fortunately, my research turned up something useful. Recently, fragments of dinosaurs had started to turn up in Malaysia, and that was a country we would visit. In 2014, paleontologists at the University of Malaya revealed that they had found a tooth of a Cretaceous ornithischian dinosaur, an order of beaked herbivorous dinosaurs that includes one of the kids' favourites, Triceratops. Subsequently, there have been reports of possible iguanodon fossils too. But it wasn't these discoveries that caught my eye. In fact, the fossil of greatest interest to me was also the first dinosaur fossil discovered in Malaysia. It was uncovered in 2012 by a team from the University of Malaya in Malaysia and Waseda University and Kumamoto University in Japan. The fossil in question was recovered from Pahang, but the exact location of the site was kept a secret due to possibilities of illegal fossil hunting. What have they discovered? A single dark-coloured tooth, just under an inch long and around about 0.3 inches wide. The tooth is quite distinctive, with two sharp edges on the front and the back called carinae that exhibit serrations. These are typical features of carnivorous theropod dinosaurs like Tyrannosaurus and Allosaurus. But before we move on, I think I should provide you with a little dinosaur primer so I can show you where, very broadly, this dinosaur fits in with the rest of the dinosaur family picture. The earliest dinosaurs were bipedal, like Eoraptor, who lived in the late Triassic about 231 million years ago in Argentina. As you can see, Eoraptor, at about a metre long, might have been able to give your knees a bit of a nibble, but we have to go a long way before we meet the terrifying meat-eating giants that evolved in the later Mesozoic. Dinosaurs would evolve and diversify throughout the Mesozoic, producing a variety of forms and, in general, demonstrating an increase in size through their evolutionary history, an observation called Cope's rule. Dinosaurs are only very rarely seen to evolve into smaller sizes, and the average weight of a Mesozoic dinosaur was around 100 kilograms. Dinosaurs can be split into two broad groups and are generally differentiated on the basis of the structure of the pelvis. So we can get a better feel for this, let's look at the human pelvis for comparison. The bones we should be keeping in mind are the pubis, the ischium, and the ilium. So, to those dinosaur groups. Firstly, the Saurischia, also called lizard hip dinosaurs. In these dinosaurs, the pubis points forwards. This group of dinosaurs includes the two-legged theropod dinosaurs like T-Rex and the sauropod dinosaurs like Diplodocus. The second group of dinosaurs are referred to as the Ornithischia, or bird hip dinosaurs. These dinosaurs have a pubis that points backwards. These forms tend to be more common in the Cretaceous and include dinosaurs such as Edmontosaurus and Triceratops. Just to clear up some potential confusion here before we move on, this group of dinosaurs are called bird-hipped dinosaurs as the pelvis looks a bit like a bird's. But birds, in fact, probably evolved from the lizard-hipped Saurischian dinosaurs, specifically from the bipedal theropods during the Jurassic period. As you can see from this figure, many different types of dinosaur would evolve into these broad groupings with only one member surviving to the present day, the avian dinosaurs, or birds if you would prefer. And it is to this group, the theropods, that our particular dinosaur belongs. But the particular theropod tooth that was found in Malaysia had a very specific ridge pattern running down its length and micro-ornamentation on its surface. The tooth is also quite conical in shape. These features are indicative of a particular type of theropod dinosaur. This particular dinosaur is a paleontological star. This is the tooth from a Spinosaur. So, for the rest of this episode, let's look at the following. Who was the first to discover the Spinosaurus and why was it puzzling? Why was this a lost dinosaur for so many years? Why are Spinosaurs so special and how do we solve what I'll be calling Stromer's riddle? The first Spinosaur to be revealed to the scientific community has an interesting history in its own right. It was named and scientifically described by a famous German paleontologist with the grand name of Ernst Stromer von Reichenbach. Stromer had an aristocratic background dating back to the 13th century that included courtiers, lawyers, architects and scientists. In fact, he had the title Freiherr, kind of the equivalent of baron. He was apparently no fan of roughing it in the field, but even so, he would complete a number of expeditions to Egypt in less than ideal conditions. It is amazing how a love of fossils will drive you out of your comfort zone. His first paleontological love was mammals, not dinosaurs. So in November 1910, he embarked on an expedition to find evidence for early mammals from the late Cretaceous. By 1911, following a brief time in quarantine on his ship, the Cleopatra, due to a cholera outbreak, he was in the Egyptian desert with his friend Richard Markgraf, an Austrian who had fallen in love with Egypt and its western desert and who was living close to Cairo. It was a tense time politically in Egypt, and Stromer, as a German, had some difficulty in obtaining permits to explore the area from the British and French authorities. Eventually, with permits secured though, they started to hunt for fossils and, over the course of a number of months, although not having too much luck with finding early mammals, they uncovered the remains of turtles, crocodiles, marine reptiles, and of course, dinosaurs. Stromer had to return to Germany in 1912, leaving Markgraf to continue to explore. Later that year, Markgraf started to uncover a most remarkable fossil contained in rocks dating to the Upper Cretaceous, about 100 million years ago, near El Bahariya, about 230 miles away from Cairo. He shipped this to Stromer in Germany, who by 1915 had described and officially named the fossil Spinosaurus aegypticus, the Egyptian spine lizard. Even though it was an incomplete skeleton, it was certainly unlike any other large theropod dinosaur the world had seen before. It had a unique, long, about 15-foot narrow, very crocodile-like jaw. Its teeth were conical, not blade-like, and rising off its back vertebrae were enormous spines, some as much as 5 feet in height. Stromer first speculated that these might support a large fatty hump like you might see in bison or zebu cattle, but this hypothesis was later rejected in favour of a large sail. perhaps used in display or thermoregulation. What was even more strange to Stroma, though, was the fact that the Spinosaur was only one out of at least two other large theropod dinosaurs, including Barhariosaurus and Carcharodontosaurus, that were around 40 feet long. This just didn't make sense. How could such an ecosystem support so many apex predators, top dogs, living in such close proximity? This became known as Stroma's riddle. The story of Stroma's remarkable dinosaur takes a rather sad turn, though, during World War II. The Spinosaur remains, along with many of the other specimens from this expedition, were proudly displayed at the Bavarian State Collection for Paleontology and Geology in Munich, southern Germany. These fossils had made Stroma really quite famous. This did not impress, though, one Karl Breuerlen, head of the Paleontology collections and supporter of the Nazi Party. Stroma had openly criticised the Nazis, and as a result, Breuerlen refused to move Stroma's collections to safety during the war, even though most works of art and important scientific collections had been moved to caves or salt mines for protection. The inevitable happened. On the evening of April 24, 1944, the Royal Air Force targeted Munich for a nighttime bombing raid. Unfortunately, one of the buildings hit was the museum where Stroma's fossils were held, all reduced to dust in the space of an evening. In addition to this scientific tragedy, Stroma's dislike for the Nazi regime also caused him personal tragedy. Although his fame and aristocratic background protected him, his three sons were sent to the front line. Two were killed, and the other son was captured by the Soviets and not returned to Germany until after the war. All that remained of Stroma's Spinosaur were some of his notes and sketches. Even the photographic records of the Spinosaur were lost, only turning up in 1995 in a collection of Stroma's records donated to the museum by his only surviving son, Wolfgang. So the holotype, the originally described specimen, was lost to science, but other Spinosaurid theropods started to be discovered around the world. Spinosaurs are now classified as the family Spinosauridae that consists of two subfamilies, the Baryocinae and the Spinosaurinae, the latter of which includes Stroma's Spinosaurus aegypticus. The family Spinosauridae is now known to be a wide-ranging group of dinosaurs with specimens found in Africa, Europe, South America, Asia and Australia. They first appear during the late Jurassic, about 155 million years ago, then start to dwindle in numbers between 93 and 100 million years ago, and are last known around 85 million years ago in the mid-late Cretaceous. They are still puzzling though. They have elongated crocodile-like skulls and conical teeth and spines along their back that might have, as we said, supported a sail. The crocodile-like skull suggests that part of the diet of the group of these dinosaurs consisted of fish. This opens up an interesting possibility that this could be the only known predatory dinosaur that spent at least some of its time in water. As a quick aside here, it is important to address a common misconception. There were plenty of fully aquatic reptiles that lived at the same time as the dinosaurs. However, these were not dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are a group of very specific animals with particular diagnostic features like the structure of the hips that we mentioned earlier. Like modern whales though, all of the marine reptiles had evolved from older animals, not dinosaurs, that once lived on land. Let's have a quick look at some of the main groups that were swimming through the Mesozoic oceans. Ichthyosaurs were streamlined marine reptiles, many of which closely resembled modern dolphins in today's oceans. They are often regarded as a classic example of convergent evolution. Basically, unrelated creatures evolved similar features as the result of living in similar environments and interacting with that environment in a similar way. In the case of these two creatures, as high-speed marine predators, although ichthyosaurs probably had cephalopods like ammonites and belemnites on the menu in addition to fish. These are plesiosaurs that contained many of the long-necked marine reptiles like the elasmosaurs. But by the Cretaceous, a new marine reptile had evolved, which, by the end of the period, were certainly the kings of the oceans. Some of the large members of the group were around 14 metres long. These are the wonderfully scary mosasaurs. A member of that group, Tylosaurus, on loan from the National Museum of Natural History, has been my companion through this series. Just look at those teeth and these extra pterygoid teeth that are on the palate here. You certainly would not want to meet this guy on a Cretaceous scuba diving vacation. So we know we have aquatic marine reptiles. How do we go about testing this hypothesis of an aquatic, or at least semi-aquatic dinosaur? It is true that the Spinosaurus skull and teeth do resemble fish-eating crocodiles like the gharial. In addition, partly digested fish scales have been found fossilized in the stomach contents of some specimens. However, non-semi-aquatic creatures like bears and wolves eat fish too. A paper released in 2010 by a team including Romain Armois at the University of Lyon suggested that oxygen isotopes might be used to determine how much of an aquatic lifestyle the Spinosauridae may have exhibited. Oxygen occurs in two forms: light oxygen-16 with 8 protons and 8 neutrons, and heavy oxygen-18 with 8 protons and 10 neutrons. Land-dwelling creatures lose a lot of water through breathing and evaporation, and it is the light form of water that contains the oxygen-16 that gets evaporated. As a result, it is the heavy oxygen-18 that is concentrated in tooth enamel. Aquatic animals lose less water than terrestrial creatures, and as such have less oxygen-18 in their teeth. Aquatic creatures also drink more and are constantly flushing water through their bodies, keeping the oxygen-18 levels low. The researchers collected samples from 133 Cretaceous specimens of various species, including spinosaurs, other dinosaurs, and crocodiles, and found that the oxygen-16 to 18 ratio for spinosaurs were more similar to crocodiles than to other dinosaurs. Were the spinosaurs aquatic then? At the time of this paper, there were relatively few or well-preserved complete skeletons that could be examined to see if the rest of the Spinosaur skeleton demonstrated any aquatic adaptations. Our story now moves to Nizar Ibrahim, currently a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Chicago. For his PhD research at University College Dublin in Ireland, he was studying all of the fauna in the Kemkem beds in Morocco. These are late Cretaceous sediments deposited between 100 to 94 million years ago. This was quite the undertaking, but Nazir was hoping to paint a picture of the entire environment as it existed back then in northwestern Africa in an attempt to bring a lost world back to life. This part of the Spinosaurus story starts with Nizar Ibrahim's chance encounter with a Bedouin fossil hunter during 2008 in the town of Efraud in Morocco. Ibrahim was shown a collection of dinosaur bones, including one that looked like a hand. The bones were associated with a very distinctive purple sediment with yellow streaks. Cut now to 2009, where we find Ibrahim visiting the Natural History Museum of Milan in Italy. Here he was shown a partial skeleton of an exciting fossil, a fossil that is obviously the same species as Stromer's Spinosaur, Spinosaurus aegypticus. Now this in its own right would be exciting, especially as it appeared to be more complete than Stromer's specimen, but there was something else. On examining some of the rocks still clinging to the bones, Ibrahim realised that it was exactly the same type of sedimentary matrix that he'd found in Efraud a year earlier. This may be part of the same specimen. This was great news, not only because a more complete picture of the anatomy of Spinosaurus could be gained, but there was also the possibility of putting this creature in the context of the environment in which it lived. This is why illegal fossil hunting is such a problem to paleontologists. Without the context of the rocks where a specimen was found, the value of any fossil is greatly diminished. A fossil found in location can tell us when it lived, but so much more too. It can tell us about the environment of the creature that it inhabited and other creatures that shared that environment, including details of plant life, climate, and geography, vital information to bring life to these ancient bones. So all Ibrahim had to do was locate the fossil hunter he met in 2008 and find out from him where he found it. Unfortunately, Ibrahim did not know his name and could not remember anything about him, apart from that he wore white clothes and had a moustache. This, unfortunately, is a profile that fits many men in Morocco. This is why he, along with Samir Zahouri from the University of Casablanca and Dave Martill of the University of Portsmouth in the UK, found themselves in a cafe in Erfoud at the end of a fruitless search for the fossil hunter, when a man in white with a moustache walked by. It was him. Apparently he took a little convincing, but eventually he led the scientists to the extraction site of the fossil. From it, they were able to deduce that the environment that Spinosaurus lived in was a lush plain over which rivers meandered about 100 million years ago, during a short interval between the transition from the early to the late Cretaceous. Ibrahim was able to scan all the bones from this new find, but also combine them on a computer, scaling some for size with other specimens in other collections. From this, he made a reconstruction of the Spinosaur that suggested that an adult Spinosaurus aegypticus would have been about 50 feet long, which made it larger than T-Rex at around about 40.5 feet long. As a result, Spinosaurus aegypticus would have been the largest carnivorous dinosaur that had been discovered at that time. This particular reconstruction also suggests that Spinosaurus had a very odd body plan when compared to other theropod dinosaurs, with a barrel-shaped torso like modern whales and dolphins, rather a small pelvis and short stumpy hind limbs with flat feet. When modelled, it was found that in this reconstruction, the dinosaur's centre of gravity would have been well forward, making it unlikely it could walk in an effective bipedal manner like the rest of its theropod cousins, and unlike many of the earlier reconstructions that showed it as a fully bipedal animal. It was suggested that it may have employed its front legs to help it walk in a quadrupedal manner on land, similar to late Cretaceous duck-billed dinosaurs. Under this reconstruction, those rather short hind limbs could be interpreted to have acted as paddles in water, a bit like modern otters. Its bones were also extremely dense, a feature shared by many modern semi-aquatic mammals, such as the hippopotamus, where one of the main problems is not floating, but combating natural buoyancy. In this model of Spinosaurs, the tail is long and contains bones that are rather loosely connected. Theropods tend to have very stiff tails that they use as a counterbalance when walking. Under this particular hypothesis, the long, flexible tail of Spinosaurus may have been able to bend laterally like those of crocodiles, perhaps propelling it through water. And then there is that marvellous long skull and its narrow jaws armed with conical teeth. The skull resembles that of fish-eating crocodiles like the gharial. In the dinosaur snout, you can find pits resembling the foramina found in crocodiles. In living crocodiles, these foramina house the pressure sensors that are used to detect the movement of prey in water. Is it possible that Spinosaurus had this useful skill too? Overall, the model presented with small pelvis and somewhat stumpy paddling back legs and long narrow jaws somewhat resembles the ancestors of the whales, carnivorous terrestrial creatures who had also adopted a semi-aquatic lifestyle. Could this be a creature that was truly adapted for life in the water? If this is the case, then this is the second reason why Spinosauridae are so special. Not only would they contain the largest carnivorous dinosaurs that ever lived, they would also be the only known truly aquatically adapted dinosaurs. If this is the case, it also helps us solve Stromer's riddle. How could the giant Spinosaurus live along other giant theropod dinosaurs? If Spinosaurus is semi-aquatic, it's easy. They would be living in different environments and mostly preying upon aquatic rather than terrestrial organisms. In technical terms, ecological niche partitioning had occurred, thus allowing these giants to live close to one another. Spinosaurus was a large creature, probably because it was preying on other large creatures. If we follow the semi-aquatic model, the fossils of very large turtles, 8 feet long lungfish, 13 feet long coelacanth fish, and 25 feet long sawfish found in the same sedimentary deposits may have formed some of the prey items for this animal. If this interpretation of Spinosaurus is correct, what a fantastic sight this beast would have been. Stalking, perhaps heron-like, at the side of a river, dipping its long snout into the water to feel the vibrations of fish as they swam by, with other individuals actively swimming through the water like crocodiles with that magnificent sail, perhaps brightly coloured, defining its territory or advertising for a mate. This interpretation of Spinosaurus paints this dinosaur as a creature that was in transition between the terrestrial and aquatic environment, a kind of transitional form. A word of caution though, it is important to remember that any model is a hypothesis, and this one is certainly being highly debated in the circles of vertebrate paleontology. Some researchers are not yet convinced about this new anatomical reconstruction of Spinosaurus, or some of the interpretations that are being drawn from it. This investigation has shown, though, how new fossils are continually pushing paleobiological research forward, even if pushing forward means generating more debate and alternate hypotheses. The paleontological discipline of paleobiology is alive and well, and our insights into ancient creatures like this are only going to get clearer as new discoveries are made and more flesh is placed back onto old bones.